So just, now you're good.
Thank you. So the conclusion was that if you consider X hyperkähler manifold of dimension 2D, then it has this topological particularity that there exists a quadratic form Q on the cohomology. So I will consider an integral quadratic form so to make it normalized, which is characterized by the condition that for any alpha in H2 of X with any coefficient, you can take Z if you like. So here I should take cohomology modulo torsion. Q of alpha to the D. Here I have to put, so there exists a constant lambda x which is in Q, such that for any alpha in the Reto cohomology class, Q alpha to the D is equal to lambda x sum over x of alpha to the 2D. So X is of dimension 2D, so the real dimension is 4D, and you have this degree. So the normalization is unique if you impose furthermore that the lambda is positive. So today, of course, this is a very strong topological restriction, because if you take a general manifold, you won't have the existence of such a Q. Here you have a homogeneous form of degree 2D which exists, but in general it can take any form. So now I would like to say more about this Q, and there are the following facts. First of all, we know the signature. It has 3 plus, and the rest are minuses. Okay. So I mentioned here that this quadratic form is essentially determined by the condition that for any xt, which is a deformation of x, so you consider sigma xt, which is the holomorphic two form generating the H20 part of the cohomology of xt. We have the condition that Q of sigma xt equal to 0. Okay. But in fact, we know also more. So here in particular, Q is non-degenerate, and the second statement is that Q of sigma xt bar is positive. So let me explain why, how these two properties follow from this formula. So the point is that you just differentiate. So you choose H in H2 of XR, which is a Kähler class. And then you differentiate this formula at the point H. Okay, so we know that Q of H is positive, and then you differentiate and you get that Q of alpha H times Q of H to the d minus 1, so that might be a coefficient d too, is lambda x integral over x of alpha to the 2d minus 1 h. No, sorry, it's absolutely not, it's alpha h to the 2d minus 1. there is a coefficient d on the left and a coefficient 2d on the right. So in fact, you must have a coefficient 2 here. Okay. And so you conclude that because this is non-zero, you conclude that Q of alpha h is 0 if and only if the class alpha h to d minus 1 is equal to 0 in the top degree cohomology of X. But that, by definition, is so it's a notion of Hodge theory. This is exactly saying that the class alpha is primitive. Okay. So the primitive classes are those which are orthogonal to the class H for the class for Q. Okay, and then I continue. I differentiate again a second time. And I find that if Q of alpha h is 0 and Q of beta h is 0, Q of alpha beta Q of h to the d minus 1 is equal to lambda x sum over x of alpha beta h to the to d minus 2 now. And now this is finished because again, so this is different from 0, and that describes for me the quadric Q on the space of primitive cohomology, and it is given by this formula, which is the very classical, called Lefschetz intersection form. And this is known as the Hodge-Riemann relations. The fact that this intersection form that we have here, H is fixed, and this is an intersection form on primitive cohomology. This has signature. Now I have a 2 plus and B2 minus 3 minus. The dimension is one less because we are on primitive cohomology. Okay. And also part of the second of the Hodge-Riemann relation is that this form on the right satisfies the properties that I should have given a name. That if I take alpha, well, so the property of positivity that I have here, it is satisfied by this by the intersection form on the right. Okay. So that's how we get these two properties. And so the conclusion is that we know more about the period map because of this condition. So now let D so yesterday I was just considering inside this projective space those classes which are in the quadric defined by Q, but now I will consider the set of alpha such that Q of alpha is 0 and Q of alpha bar is positive. This is by this relation. This is what is satisfied by the 2-0 form of deformation of X, and so of course this is an open condition, so we don't see it locally, but and what we discussed yesterday was more this condition, and we find that the period map. So yesterday I had been considering a local situation like this, where I have a family of deformation of my X, but I had assumed that B is simply connected. For example, a ball, and I had discussed the period map from B to this space, PH2 of X C, associating to D to T, the class of the 2-0 form on XT, or the line it generates. And the conclusion of all this is that the P takes a value in D, and in fact, I explained yesterday the computation of the differential, and it is a local holomorphic diffeomorphism. From the basis of the universal deformation to this D. So this is the local story, and now globally we know in fact much more, but the advantage of working locally is that I assume my B is simply connected, so all the fibers are naturally homeomorphic, and so I can naturally identify the cohomology of all the fibers. Now, globally, that is not true. Usually there is some monodromy. So the correct object to consider is the marked moduli spaces. Okay. You should think to the Teich, it's the analog of the Teichmüller space for curves. So what as a set, basically the set of isomorphism class of a pair xt alpha, where xt is I mean isomorphism class as a complex manifold. Xt is a deformation of X, and alpha is an isomorphism between the cohomology of X and the cohomology of xt, and let's assume that I want that this alpha since well, is compatible with the quadratic forms on both sides. Okay. So that looks arbitrary, but this way, so what I used before, which was the fact that I had a natural isomorphism between the cohomology of xt and that of X, I don't have it anymore in general, but I simply, this is the data that I give to myself. And then, well, one has to be careful because I wrote moduli space, but that space is not extremely bad, but also not perfect, but still, well, you can construct it. But in any case, so let's call it like this. By definition, the period map is defined on this moduli space. Now, what are so this is what I call the global theory, and now there are very strong results on this. On this globally defined period map, things that I summarize in the following theorem. First of all, so this is a lot of work and due to many people. Weubrecht proves that the period map, the global period map, is surjective. How is it done? This uses these twistor lines that I described the first day. They are very nice because they are really global deformations and not only small deformations. And the point is that these twistor lines via the period map, they map to conics, complete conics in this D. And so basically what he does is that he starts from a point, a period point. He takes one of these conics, one of these twistor lines, and then choose any point here, and then apply choose another twistor line, and again, and finally you just have to show formally that you can reach any point by this successive construction. So there is something to do, but the geometry is entirely that of the twistor line. The second point is very important for the geometry of, in particular, of this space. It turns out that this space is not Hausdorff, but the phenomenon is entirely understood by Weubrecht. He says the following: let x prime be two birational or bimeromorphically equivalent hyperkähler manifolds. Then a small deformation of X is isomorphic to a small deformation of X prime, meaning more precisely that you consider the universal family of deformations of your X. Similarly, you have the similar construction for your X prime, and what happens is that away from for closed analytic subsets on the base, you have well, for an adequate isomorphism between the base and basis, xt, the fibers are isomorphic for, well, here you have an analytic isomorphism. The fibers are isomorphic for T outside a closed analytic subset. So this is a situation where by a small deformation your two manifolds become isomorphic, but at the given point the isomorphism is only gives only a birational map. But what is important from the fact that from this picture you conclude that these two birational equivalent hyperkähler manifolds have the same period point. Well, because you consider the period map for this family, the period map for this one, and they coincide away from this closed analytic subset, just by continuity. That means they coincide everywhere. So one way to say this is that is to say that the marked moduli space is not Hausdorff. Typically, the situation here is that you have your 2 points which are not isomorphic and away from a closed subset, they become isomorphic. The period map P, which is defined here, identifies the non-separated points. Okay, so in particular that shows something which was known already more than 20 years ago by examples of the bar, that you certainly do not have a Torelli theorem in the form that if you have a same period points, the two manifolds should be isomorphic. In fact, they are only bimorphically equivalent. And the last point is very important. This is now due to Verbitsky. He says the following. So you have your period map, and so we know now by Weybrecht that it is surjective. We know also that it factors through well the I don't know if there is a name for well you quotient that space by the non-separation. That is, well, you put an equivalence relation on this space by identifying all points that are not separated. Your period map factors through this quotient, and he says that the result is an isomorphism. Well, it's an analytic map. It's a holomorphic isomorphism on each component of, when I say component, a connected component of this space. So it's not completely what we call the Torelli theorem, saying that your X is determined by the period point, because what this leaves is to understand, because there is the problem with this marking. And we would like to forget about the marking. But forgetting about the marking is essentially understanding how the monodromy acts. So, but this is a tricky point. So, well, we stick to this version of Torelli theorem. Okay, so this summarizes the Hodge theory of hyperkähler manifold in the Kähler context. But now the point of the whole theory is that the subject is coming from Kähler geometry, but in fact to construct examples, it's up to now that only via algebraic geometry that we're able to construct non-trivial models or even topologically. And so where algebraic geometry is, it's very simple, because as I mentioned in the first lecture, we know exactly by the Kodaira theorem which Kähler manifolds are algebraic. There are those which have a Kähler class which is rational. And so now so for your X to be algebraic, you need H, which is a Kähler class. Which has to be rational. So this is a Kodaira criterion. Let's forget about the fact that H is Kähler, but we want at least that H is of type 1-1. And as I explained yesterday, the condition is that Q of the 2-0 class on X, H is equal to 0. Or more precisely, as I explained, that if you consider the orthogonal complement of sigma X, what you get is H20 plus H11. But here your H is real, so if it is in H20 plus H11, it has to be of type 1-1. And so the conclusion is that that means that the Kähler manifolds for which the class H will give say a polarization, that is will be the first class of a line bundle, are those for which the period point lies in this space, which is just a hyperplane section of our period domain. So dH now will be the set of alpha in H2 P H2 of x C, such that, and so you have the original condition, Q alpha is 0, Q alpha bar is positive, and you add the condition that Q of alpha H is 0, which guarantees that your H is of type 1, and that gives you a polarization. In fact, it turns out that we know also by a result of Weierbrech that if you choose any H satisfying this condition, then the general element that you have here is correspond to a hyperkähler manifold for which the class H is the class of either positive or negative. That is the class of or plus or minus the class of an ample line bundle. Okay. And this dH will be the polarized period domain. And now we are close to algebraic geometry because the points which are here, they correspond to period points of algebraic varieties. Finally, in order to get the true moduli space as in algebraic geometry, we have to take the quotient of this space by the space which forgets about the marking. And it's here that we see that it is essential that we restrict to polarized manifolds. Of course, so now so the true moduli space is forgetting about the marking, so I should take the quotient by a certain group gamma H, which is, for example, it can take the full orthogonal group of this form, preserving H, or finite index subgroup of this. When taking this quotient, we will get our moduli space by applying Verbitsky. I could do, a priori, the same construction for the D without the H. It's true that, a priori, the Verbitsky-Torelli theorem tells me that if I take finally the quotient of the D by the whole group gamma of automorphism, I get something which parameterizes isomorphism classes of hyperkähler manifold. The reason why one does not do this is that the space that one gets is very poor. It's exactly as in the theory of abelian varieties and the complex tori. For complex tori, you can consider the whole family of deformations. You know very well how they are parameterized, and then you have a big automorphism group of the cohomology, which act, and you should take the quotient. But the result is terrible. There is no topology. But here the difference is that this is due to a factor of hyperbolic geometry, and this is related to this computation of the signature that I explained. That when we restrict to this dH, the action of the orthogonal group is good, and we have a quotient, and we can do the theory of automorphic forms, and this is indeed an algebraic variety, etc. Okay, so this is the general, I would say, the transcendental theory, and what remains to do is finally constructing examples. What does this theory is that it emphasizes the fact that hyperkähler geometry is related to the understanding of this type of period domains, or this type of variation of Hodge structures, which are called Hodge structures of a hyperkähler tape. So with this condition that the H to the 0 number is 1. So Now the point is construction from of models from algebraic geometry. So I started explaining this in the first lecture. In dimension 2, you have the K3 surfaces, and we know them very well. Then in higher dimension, dimension 2K, maybe K at least 2, we have at least the examples constructed by Beauville, given by desingularizing the symmetric product of a K3 surface. And then there are not so many more examples. Namely, you have more generally the moduli spaces of pure sheaves, pure semi-stable coherent sheaves. So pure, for example, the torsion-free, or pure means that the dimension of the support is pure dimensional on a K3 surface. The Hilbert scheme is a particular example. You take ideal sheaves of a subscheme of a finite length. So this is an example of such an object. And now there are two possibilities. Either they are projective. Here I should not put semi-stable, but rather stable. In fact, what I want are the simple objects. So we know that they are smooth by Mukai, and when they are projective, they are hyperkähler. But the problem is that this apparent generalization did not provide new models. In fact, all of them are deformations of varieties of this type. And in particular, topologically, you don't get new models this way. But there is another case where you get a non-projective moduli space. It's when your moduli space of stable objects is not compact. It's because you have to add semi-stable, non-stable objects. What happened in that case is that on the boundary, in general, you get something which is singular. And then, for one of these examples, O'Grady constructed desingularization. So this is a 10-dimensional hyperkähler manifold. So it's a desingularization of a certain such a moduli space. Concretely, you consider you start from a K3 surface. You consider the moduli space of semi-stable rank 2 coherent sheaves with so 2 is for the rank, 0 is for the first Chern class, and 4 is for the C2 of your vector bundle. And well, this object is it is singular, and O'Grady shows that well, there exist the desingularizations abstractly by Hironaka resolution theorem, but he shows that there exists hyperkähler desingularization. This is the O'Grady exceptional example. Now there is With this construction, there is a small difficulty, which is due to the count of parameters. Because, well, the K-tree surfaces, maybe consider algebraic K-tree surfaces, because we want to do algebraic geometry. They have 19 parameters. Why? It's because B2 of a K-tree surface is 22. So I consider my period domain. So you take the projective space, you lose one dimension. You take the quadric, you lose one dimension. And you impose the condition of being perpendicular to a class, and you lose again one condition. That's why you arrive at 19 parameters. But and in general, for polarized hyperkähler manifolds, the same, what we told, says that you have a B2 minus 3 parameters for algebraic deformation of hyperkähler manifold. But for the SK, the B2 of the SK is at least is equal to, it's one more than for the K-tree surface. So that means that the parameter space for algebraic deformations have 20 parameters. And for the O'Grady moduli space, the situation is still is again different. This hyperkähler manifold, which is 10-dimensional, has a B2 equal 24. So it has 21 parameters. These algebraic deformations, which exist by the abstract theory of the period map, you won't get them by just deforming the K-tree surface. Typically, for the Hilbert scheme, when you deform the K-tree surface, the deformation of the Hilbert scheme that you get, there are those which preserve the exceptional divisor that appears in the resolution of the singularities from the symmetric product to the Hilbert scheme. And the general deformation, it loses that exceptional divisor. Okay. So what I want to explain now is something that I find surprising, because it suggests that there might be many more hyperkähler manifolds than those that we know already. Which is the fact that associated to a cubic fourfold, there are many, or at least 3 different types of hyperkähler manifolds. So a cubic fourfold, it's a cubic fourfold hypersurface in so maybe let's call it Y. So it's defined by a cubic homogeneous equation, and you want it to be smooth. This kind of manifolds, they have nothing to do with K-trivial geometry, because they are Fano manifolds, so the canonical bundle is very negative. But their relationship with hyperkähler geometry is in some sense indirect, is via the fact that if you look at the Hodge theory of on the H4 of such Y, that means that you consider the Hodge structure on the degree 4 cohomology, which is given by the Hodge decomposition. It has the following form. And this piece is one-dimensional. This one, of course, by Hodge symmetry, it is one-dimensional, and the total this space has a dimension 23. Furthermore, the cubic fourfold has 20 parameters, and so also I should mention that on the degree 4 cohomology there is the intersection pairing, which plays the role of this intersection form Q. So the conclusion is that looking at your cubic fourfold, the Hodge theory of your cubic fourfold, what you get is a variation of Hodge structure of hyperkähler tape, in the sense that, well, of course, I could change by grading by -1, and what I get is a polarized variation of Hodge structure. Well, I should mention the presence of an algebraic class here, which plays the role of the class H that we had before, etc. So in any case, formally, we have something, this is a variation of Hodge structure of hyperkähler tape, which is polarized. And the important point is that it has 20 parameters, which is more than for K3 surfaces, at least it's one more. So that looks very artificial, but curiously, starting from that observation, plenty of, at least 3 different constructions of actually associated families of hyperkähler manifold with this variation of Hodge structure were found. So, and let me summarize these 3 constructions. Basically, that they will re-give the same topological example that we have here, but with more parameters. The parameters we were missing here will be present. So the first construction was due to Beauville and Donaghy in 86 or something like that, or 88, I don't remember. They just consider F1 of Y. This is the variety of lines in Y, so it's a general fact. So this is a set of P1, so the P1s in P5, they are parameterized by the Grassmannian, and you consider those lines which are entirely contained in Y. And it's very easy to show that it's smooth. The F1 of Y is smooth when Y is smooth. This is a general fact which is true over any field. And they prove that this is a hyperkähler manifold. It is of the dimension 3, the dimension 4, sorry. And it is the deformation equivalent, the deformation of S2. One should add furthermore that the variation of Hodge structure of this variety is in fact the same as the one of Y, because you have the universal P1 bundle. So over each line, over each point here, I have a P1 parameterized by this line. It maps to Y, and if you consider this as a correspondence between F1 of Y and Y, the P upper star map. This map here is an isomorphism of Hodge structures. So that was the first example. And then it took many years before a second example of a higher dimension was found. The second example was found by Christian Lehn, Manfred Lehn, Christoph Zorger, and Duco van Straten. They did something similar, except that considering lines which are degree 1 curves in Y, they consider degree 3 rational curves. And degree 3 rational curves, in fact, if you have a degree 3 rational curve in your Y, it generates linearly P3. Well, if it is non-degenerate, that means that it is contained in a cubic surface. And in fact, then it moves in the two-dimensional linear system. Okay. So instead of considering the whole family of these degree 3 rational curves, they consider the data of a surface, cubic surface in Y, plus P2 of such a degree 3 rational curves in S. And they prove that the family of these objects, one has to, of course, to be very careful with the singularities, because now, in that case, we had the Grassmannian. Things were very easy to prove smoothness, but here they have the degeneracies. The theory of the Hilbert scheme of degree 3 rational curves, it's not so easy. So in any case, they prove that this way they get a hyperkähler manifold Z of dimension 8, which is a deformation equivalent to S4. Again, so this is an example, and exactly by the same argument, there is a correspondence, natural correspondence, realizing the degree 4 cohomology, it's a Hodge structure of Y, as the H2 of this hyperkähler manifold. So you have an isomorphism of Hodge structures. And the last example is due to Lazar, Radu Lazar, Julia Saka, and myself. So, and by this method, we can construct deformations of the O'Grady exceptional example. So the construction is as follows. So you have your Y in P5, which is a smooth cubic fourfold. When you take a hyperplane section, so this is a P4, so just defined by a linear equation. So you get YH, which is now a cubic threefold. So when this hyperplane section is smooth, there is an associated complex torus, which is called the intermediate Jacobian, which is defined using the Hodge structure on the cohomology of YH, which was very important in the work of Clemens and Griffiths. Okay, so you take the quotient of the cohomology of degree 3 of YH with complex coefficient by the H21 and by the integral cohomology, which gives you a complex torus the way that I discussed in the first lecture. And so this construction, it gives you, in fact, a family. So this tori, here there are 5-dimensional complex tori. And of course, the family of Y's, it is parameterized by the P5 dual of all hyperplane sections of your P5. So you have a 5-dimensional family of 5-dimensional complex tori. And so that gives you something like this. But of course, it is only parameterized by the open set of hyperplane sections for which the YH is smooth. But still, the total space is smooth, 10-dimensional, in fact, algebraic variety. But the problem is that it is not projective. But it was known to Donaki and Markman that this intermediate Jacobian fibration has a non-degenerate closed holomorphic two form. And in fact, it's easy to recover this non-degenerate holomorphic two form by constructing, as before, a correspondence between this J and Y, and to get the 2-0 form by starting from the H31 of Y and pulling back via a universal correspondence. And what we did is, so maybe call it GU to say that it's only over U. And what we proved is that there exists a compactification of so this intermediate Jacobian fibration, which is hyperkähler, and is a deformation of the O'Grady plane manifolds. So if you prefer, by this method, we for these known examples, the S2, the S4, and the O'Grady example, we have 20 parameters families of deformations built from cubic fourfolds and not from K3 surfaces, which does not give enough parameters. I should stop soon. I just want to explain one point about these statements. Each time I added that the hyperkähler manifold so constructed is a deformation of this and this model. There have been two ways of thinking to this. To this deformation statement. In the three cases, one possible way was by this was the one which was indicated first by Beauville and Donaghy, by specializing to the so-called Pfaffian case. These are cubics in so you if you start from a 6-dimensional vector space, you consider the wedge 2 of this V6. It has a natural cubic given by Pfaffian. Simply omega maps to omega cube. So it means the zero locus is a set of the two forms which are degenerate. Now this space is too big, but if you consider so that gives you a cubic, and then if you consider a general P5 here, the trace of this equation will give you a cubic, which we call a Pfaffian cubic. And in most of these cases, it's possible to prove the deformation tape by specializing to this case. Beauville and Donaghey explain how, in that case, there is an associated Khépri surface S, and then show that by this specialization, essentially, this species specialized to S2 or S4 or the O'Grady moduli space of this Khépri surface. But this proof is very involved, in particular computing in this Pfaffian case, the deformation tape is hard. And recently with the Collard so second method, something that we found with Collard, Lazar, Sakan, and myself, which uses something which is a sort of generalization of Weybrecht theorem, which says the following: suppose that you have so this is a family of hyperkähler manifolds, or projective hyperkähler manifolds, over the punctured disk. But over 0, you may have something singular. And then you assume that over 0, the central fiber has a multiplicity 1 component, which is birational to W, which is a hyperkähler manifold. And then we conclude that the xt that we have is in fact a deformation of this W. So this is very, the advantage is that we don't have to know very much about the central fiber. We allow very bad degeneration. The only thing that we need is this component, and it's a birational tape. So we don't have to look closely at the singularities. And using that argument, we could recover very easily the three deformation computations of deformation tapes I mentioned. Particularly the proof of the statement for the O'Grady for the degeneration of the proof of the statement for our compactified intermediate Jacobian was made much easier by this applying this theorem. So I am going to stop. I didn't say, but it's also clear from the study of the period map that if you consider a general algebraic deformation of a hyperkähler manifold, it should have only one line bundle, and its multiple. The Picard number is 1. In the deformation that we provide, we still have a Picard number which is at least 2, because the manifold that we have they admit this Lagrangian fibration, so in any case there will be a line bundle coming from the base plus an ample line bundle which is cannot be proportional because it is positive on the fibers. So these examples, they still have a Picard number 2, and at the moment there is no known 21 parameters family of algebraic deformation. But the problem might be related to the Hodge theoretic problem. As I mentioned, the key point here is the fact that via the cubic we have this 20 parameters variation of Hodge structure. And 21, I think that I don't think there are any example of a 21 parameter family of hyperkähler manifolds built by algebraic geometry. They exist abstractly, but if you want to construct the corresponding algebraic object, that do not exist, simply are not known.
So over the delta star, we have a family of hyperkähler manifold. So we can associate map from delta star to the moduli space. But can we compactify delta star inside?
Yes. So this is the point of this proof. In fact, the much stronger statement is that under this assumption, essentially there is a simultaneous resolution of singularities, maybe after a finite base change. But in fact, the way we produce this simultaneous resolution of singularity is precisely by first showing that the period map extends. Then the period map extends, and over the point 0, I have a period point. So I have a central fiber, and then we do the theories in the other direction, and finally this is the way we provide the simultaneous resolution, not at all by trying to desingularize directly, but by producing via the period map a family which has the given period map over the delta, the punctured disk. So yes, it extends, but in fact we first extend via the period map, and then come back to the geometry by the surjectivity of the period map.
And is it the same variety as the component, the period? So maybe compactified.
In fact, when I say simultaneous resolution of singularities, it's not completely true. We first have to, possibly due to the fact that the Verbitsky-Torelli theorem, it only says that if you have the same period points, they are birational. So what we produce is in fact a family of birationally equivalent hyperkähler manifolds which has a simultaneous resolution. So all of our varieties are a priori only birational to the one that we had originally. I don't know if the result is true keeping the original family. And so in particular for the central fiber, we know only up to birational equivalence. Of course, this is birational model which are hyperkähler, which of course is very restrictive.